Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Communities Committee. I'd like to remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I've agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees and everyone in the chamber to mute their microphones when not speaking. For any members of the public watching, please note that all of the committee reports that we're discussing here today are available on the Council's website, and that includes all of the recommendations that we'll be debating. Fiona, do we have any apologies or substitutes?
Yes, Convener, we've got apologies from Councillors Cheap, Proctor and Shepherd, with Councillors Whiteside, Gavin Nicholl and Councillor Boyd substituting. Councillors Durno, Councillor Louise Nicholl, Councillors Gavin Nicholl and Councillor Tommy Stewart have joined the meeting remotely, and the rest of the members.
Thank you, Fiona. Do we have any declarations of interest or statements of transparency? Councillor Scott.
Just a statement of transparency, please, Convener. I, on the odd occasion, volunteer at Caledonian Railway Brechin. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Any other declarations of interest or statements of transparency? No. OK, we'll move on then to agenda item 3. That's the minutes. So we've got the minutes 3A, the previous meeting. Do we submit this as a record of approval? Agreed. And B, Arbroath Harbour Joint Consultative Committee. We've got to approve the charges, so we'll take it as 2 steps. So it's step 1, note the minutes. Do we note the minutes? And do we approve the review of annual charges at Arbroath Harbour for the period indicated? Agreed. OK, then we move to agenda item 4. Now, I would just like to place to everyone's attention that my laptop has decided to switch itself off. Just at the wrong period, so I'll be referring to papers. If that takes a little bit longer, I do apologise. So we move to the Police Prosperity Programme, the UK Shared Prosperity Funded Projects. Alison, you're going to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, this report provides an update on approved or deferred under the Police Prosperity Fund Programme and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund programmes in September 2023 and seeks decisions on the reallocations of money to maximise the grant available this year and ensure spend can be achieved before the end of the financial year. It also recommends a further deferral of a decision on Arbroath Community Centre to allow the community-led feasibility study to be completed.
Thank you, Alison. Do we have any questions for Alison on this report? No, I don't see any questions. Oh, Councillor Scott.
Just, is there any rough idea of how much the cost will be for the Arbroath Community Centre? Because it's in the paper, it's significantly less.
Yes, at this time there has been some additional work done by the assets team. The drone survey has been done, and that's given us some options in terms of reduced cost options that we'll be able to bring to committee. But I think until we have the sort of full picture, I'm thinking about the future uses, etc. But we have indicated that there are options that are lower than those that were brought to committee in September.
Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, it's in regard to recommendation 3, number 5, agreeing to the £143,540 to be committed. If Angus Alive are not able to comply with all the conditions of the grant by the date at the end of March, what actually happens to that funding? Does that just get carried over?
So what we've got in here is that ask of Angus Alive to commit by the end of the financial year. We are looking to carry that over, but with that commitment, should they not be able to meet that deadline of the end of the year, the money would then be released back into the fund, and we would be looking for new projects. Angus Alive would be in a position to rebid for that, along with others, but it would be back to an open process rather than being a ring-fenced amount for them in the next financial year.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Sorry. OK, we move on to comments, and I'll just make a first comment. This has been described in the press as a controversial topic because of the subjects that we discussed. Now, I actually like to think that what we did last time when we discussed the Arbroath Community Centre was the committee acted like the committee should. Issues were raised, people were concerned about certain things, the committee took a decision and it's been brought back, and I think that's actually how the committee should work. There was no vote. There was nothing else on it. The committee agreed to take a decision, and that's how I'd like, you know, to see us do business going forward as well. Councillor Stewart, you've got a comment.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, it was just in regards to the proposed funding for Brechin, the Caledonian Railway. I mean, I'm really happy to see that that's been brought forward. It's obviously going to help with access improvements for people getting there. It's a busy place, well supported, and you know, I mean, it brings a lot into Angus, so I'm really happy to see that coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Any further comments? Councillor Brace.
Well, thanks, convener, and Councillor Stewart beat me to it. I think this is a wonderful thing for the Calais Railway. They went out and found the bridge, and Angus Council are helping them get it in place. And as Councillor Stewart says, it's a very busy place. It's a huge benefit to Brechin and to Angus. So all power to them. Thanks.
Any further comments? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, just similar lines. I'm absolutely delighted for Caledonian Railway. I've actually seen the bridge. It is a beautiful bridge. I know that John Gill, the chairman, has had emails from Glasgow from people in St Mungo's wanting to come and visit the bridge, so that's really good news. Brings people in from Glasgow and Angus as well. I am, however, a little bit still mystified by the £450,000 figure for the Arbroath Community Centre, and I agree with you, we'd raised our concerns and they were listened to, but it's a good job we did raise our concerns, or it maybe would have gone through. I mean, I think it was myself and Councillor Cheap that raised them, but I would like to know where the figure for the 450,000 came from, because it was before a survey. So had we not raised those concerns, we would have been approving £450,000, and it's obviously can be done a lot cheaper.
Do you want to address that, Alison?
So in terms of the earlier report that came forward, these quotes, you know, these were figures that were sought, looking at what it would take to, you know, to make good the roof, and thinking about that in terms of the marketability as well of the centre as a whole. So they were identified quotes. What that figure didn't present was, at the time, was alternative options, which is what's been done now in terms of the drone survey and thinking about sort of lesser repairs that could be done that would still make good the roof. But they were, you know, quotes were sought for that at the time in terms of what was known about the building and the works that would be required to make that good.
Councillor Boyd.
Councillor Scott partly beat me to it, so I'll change what I was going to say. I was just going to say well done to Councillor Scott and Councillor Cheap for bringing this forward. It just shows you what we can actually do when we actually all work together rather than be fighting all the time. So well done to both. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Any further comments on this agenda item? Okay, don't see any further comments, so we'll move to the recommendations. The recommendations are to note, agree, agree, and agree. There's 5 recommendations there. Do we agree and note the recommendations? Agree. Okay, thanks everybody. We move on then to agenda item 5, which is our Climate Change, Net Zero and Biodiversity One-Off Fund. Alison is going to introduce, is Jill introducing the report? Jill's introducing the report. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you, convener. Yes, so this report seeks approval of applications recommended for approval by the officer panel for use of the one-off climate change, net zero and biodiversity fund that was set aside from last year's budget for a one-off pot of funding for those topic areas. The funding was originally set aside was £1 million and 250,000 had been earmarked for Monifieth High School to ensure that that school could be built to Passive House standard. And the report in front of you today sets out all the projects that were considered for use of those funds. There was an agreed split between climate change and net zero and biodiversity. In terms of the officer panel has considered all the projects in the context of the agreed assessment process that was reported to committee previously, and have recommended the projects as set out in the report, taking into account resource within the council to deliver on the projects and the deliverability of those, and also projects that can support delivery in the longer term. So you'll see from the reports in front of you that some of those are resourced to take forward design work for climate change and net zero proposals, and that really takes into account the availability of resource in-house. So we are constrained on a lot of the resource available to us, so some of that work will actually help to progress to meet the council's corporate net zero action plan. The proposals in front of you today don't utilise the full pot of funding, and again, officers have taken into account the deliverability of part of that, and have suggested that those other projects remain on the reserve list, and we bring back a further report proposing the use of the remaining funding at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I open up now to questions. Does anybody have any questions for Jill? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. You've just told me why there's a remaining balance, Jill, but I was thinking that under the biodiversity there's a balance of 95,500, but the Angus Climate Forum, which was only looking for 20,000, wasn't given any money. I kind of thought that that would have been a reasonable investment, because it's really going to be encouraging community groups to take responsibility for work that perhaps we don't have the capacity in the council to do, and it's just getting it out much more. It's part of the CCAP thing to get engagement from all sorts of community groups. I just wondered why that wasn't brought into play. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Where officers have found themselves, particularly with the biodiversity funding, is we do have a relatively small team and actually have quite a lot of funding available from a number of external sources. So it was actually quite difficult to identify a range of projects that were deliverable within the resource available to us. The Climate Forum project was pulled together fairly last minute, and it does require a bit of resource to actually take that forward. And again, officers felt that perhaps it was one that wasn't actually delivering in terms of outputs in a tangible project, though absolutely was fundamentally important in terms of engagement work with our communities, but just that it needed further develop to work out exactly what the specific I suppose deliverables and outputs were for that specific sum of money, because it is quite a big sum of money for engagement activity, and it just needed to be further developed to show the real tangible benefits from that.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, I just had a couple of questions really about the Rosemount Primary School project. I'm not being parochial, but technology interests me, the air source heat pump design. I'm taking it we don't have the in-house resource to do that design work. And reading this sort of detail in the paper, it sounds to me like it's a bit of a pilot project that we could run over other schools. I mean, obviously Rosemount is a relatively new school. It was built in 2000. We have an awful lot of schools that are much, much older than that. So just a wee bit about the cost here, and what do we think the final cost for the project might be?
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Yes, you're absolutely correct in terms of the resource availability in-house. We have got a number of constraints in terms of our assets resource, and particularly our technical design support to take forward a lot of the design work for our road to net zero. Particularly, you'll see from the list of recommended projects in front of you, one is a road to net zero feasibility study, which is actually to take a lot of that work forward in terms of the technical assessment and the design assessment of a number of measures for council properties. The Rosemount heat pump design is effectively that. It's to undertake that technical assessment and design work and look at the feasibility of this type of technology in our schools and to progress that forward. If you just bear with me, I'll see if there is a mention in the report, a bit more detail on the specific costs of implementation. No, I don't have any information from Assets Services on the specific implementation costs, just a breakdown of the design work. So the 35,000 would be spent on a mechanical consultant, £5,000 on on-site surveys and investigations, and 5,000 on the project management. And as I say, the main scope for that is the lack of in-house resource to take that forward.
Okay, thanks, Jill. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. It's in regards to the climate change net zero projects, in particular the LED lighting installations. I'm just wondering if we happen to have sort of figures, it's a bit technical, on how much savings. I can see it's saying, 20 to 50% energy and carbon savings could be achieved. But in regards to the outlay, is it going to pay that back, if that makes sense? Are we going to save £108,000 over the lifespan of these LED lights? Because obviously LED, once it's gone, you can't sort of fix it. It needs replaced, sort of thing.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Yes, so payback period for the LED lighting is around approximately 10 years. So it's 0.24 kilowatts per hour for electricity, and that equates to about a 10-year period. That time scale may or not reduce or fluctuate just depending on energy prices and energy costs in that period.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Any further questions? Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you, Convener. And this is another one for Jill, and it's a follow-up to the question about the air source heat pump design. I'm just wondering if the expectation is that if the project is successful, this will be rolled out to other schools and council buildings, and have you got any identified locations at this stage?
Thank you, Councillor Whiteside. So in line with the Road to Net Zero report that's set out as one of the other recommended projects, that is effectively to set up some test cases for where effectively taking a type of building and assessing what type of technology may be suitable to be delivered in those types of buildings. And once that work is complete, it will effectively give us an action plan for where to target in terms of our buildings. So the work that would be completed on Rosemount Primary School would identify the benefits, the value, the technical feasibility, the costings in detail involved in terms of putting that into our schools. And as part of that work on the Road to Net Zero action plan, we'll start and come up with a prioritisation list of where we wish to target as a council to deliver on our corporate zero plan.
Thank you, Jill. Any further questions? No, I don't see any further questions. Any comments? Councillor Cowdery.
Thank you. Yeah, so I really welcome this report. Thank you so much to the officers that have put so much work into it. I think in a cost of living crisis, it can be, understandably, the thing that we do is focus on the immediate, financial circumstances of people. But we have to remember we're in a climate crisis. It's probably the single greatest threat we all face as a planet. So I'm really pleased to see that focus is being put on this, and quite right too. I'm particularly happy to see projects like the Angus Coastal Swifts project that really engage and plan to collaborate with local community. I think that's absolutely key if we're going to properly address the climate crisis. And just as an example of a community project in my ward, Kirkton Community Garden, the work's just kicked off this week, and it's a great example of how the council has collaborated with local communities. So congratulations to them, and thank you so much to the officers for putting this paper together.
Thank you, Councillor Cowdery. Any further comments? Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yes, I think we established this £1 million fund in last year's budget, and I'm certainly pleased to see the projects that have come forward. I'm pleased to see projects that are helping us get to net zero, but also I think equally importantly, projects that may offer us cost savings in running our buildings and so forth going forward. So I think there's clearly been a lot of scrutiny given to the projects selected, and I think that's good that we've been discriminating about what we've brought forward. So full marks to the officers for developing this list.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Any further comments? Okay, I don't see any further comments online either. We move to the recommendations. The recommendations are to approve, agree, and note. There's 4 recommendations. Do we agree the recommendations? Agree. Okay, thank you, everybody. That concludes the meeting of the Communities Committee.
Thanks, Convener.
John, could you stop the live stream, please?